You can quickly make an outdoor feral cat shelter using one of these 150 quart insulated picnic coolers and a couple of very basic tools. What I'm doing here is I'm using this white paper so you can see the hole I'm tracing. I thought maybe on the dark green cooler you wouldn't be able to see well. So it's a 4 to 5 inch square, plenty big enough for most cats. If you have some really big cats, you might make it a little bigger, but I wouldn't go above 5 inches. Find the measurement on the inside and trace that same pattern on the inside. Now, if you don't have any high-tech tools, you can just use a plain old utility knife like I have here. I'm piercing the outer shell. The inner and outer shell are pretty soft plastic. They're very easy to safely just pierce a little triangle. I'm cutting out a little triangle, and I could do that in all 4 corners if I had to. Now, if you happen to have access to a power drill, we'll talk about an easier way to do this, but using just a plain old kitchen knife, you could actually cut down through the inner and outer shell and the styrofoam in between, and you could complete this shelter using nothing more than a kitchen knife and a utility knife just to pierce that first little triangle to get through. If you do have access to power tools, you see I've got a spade drill bit attachment, and this is a 1 inch. A ½ inch might even be big enough to get your kitchen knife in there, but you can use this to cut quickly 4 holes in the 4 corners, and then with your kitchen knife you can just quickly get around cutting out the hole. Once the 4 holes are done, I'm just using a average little hand saw. You can go through, make sure you find your holes going from both sides if you use the linoleum knife, but if you use the drill, your holes go straight through. And you see I can quickly, using just a hand saw, go from side to side. And this table I'm using is not terribly stable, but if you have a flatter surface, you can do it very safely without the cooler jumping around quite as much as I'm dealing with here. When you've completed cutting around all 4 sides, you can just press it out. Now hold on to this piece because we're going to use those pieces of plastic later, but you'll see it's a pretty jagged edge. It's nothing great, and then that styrofoam in between tends to really flake and bead up. So what we're going to do is we're going to tape it up so we smooth off our edges. We don't want that styrofoam being scratched. We don't want water getting in between the styrofoam. So one kind of tape that's excellent for this job is Gorilla Tape. It holds up really, really well out in the elements, and it holds to itself very well. I've had shelters that I've put Gorilla Tape on, and years later it's still, the shelter's fallen apart, but the Gorilla Tape is still holding together. Now that first inside lining you see, you're gonna see it's gonna move around. It's just something we put there temporarily, and we're gonna attach the outer pieces. Now you see I'm up about a ½ inch above my hole. I'm going to put pieces on all 4 sides, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside, and then we're going to cut those corners and attach the outer pieces of tape to that inside strip to secure the whole thing. Now you see the hole is not perfect. My tape lengths are not perfect. Really, the cats do not care. I'll show you how you can clean it up and make it look nice and spiffy, but really, you can do this very quickly, very sloppily. This tape is amazing how it holds. You don't have to be a perfectionist about it, and you can very quickly do a really good job. Now I'm looking for that corner, and I'm going in and I'm cutting a diagonal cut of my excess. I'm finding the edge of the plastic and just cutting that out, cutting those 4 corners out. And you'll see that inner piece, it's going to flop around. Don't worry about it. We're going to tape that down securely once I get these 4 corners out. Now be careful with these blades. They're really sharp, but if you're calm and slow, you can, be very safe. So I'm just taping the inside, and don't worry about that curling up or moving around. I'm just securing the outer tape to the middle tape, And that looks awful right now, but it's going to look better. Pushing down all the corners of the Gorilla Tape so it adheres well. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. Now we can clean this up later, I'll show you. But you see I'm doing the exact same thing on the inside, a little bit of overhang. That's the white adhesive side. And then you want to, at the very end, you want to go around and push down the tape really well to the exterior shell, the seams of the tape where you pushed it to itself, and each place that you used it. But as I said, it's not sounding like an advertisement now, but Gorilla Tape is really wonderful for outdoor use. It holds up to very cold weather, very hot summer weather, and it sticks to itself miraculously. So you'll notice that in all of these places where I'm finishing it up, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to attach the Gorilla Tape to itself, because that is the sturdiest, firmest way. Now by cleaning up this hole, the cats can go through. If they like to scratch, they're not going to be scratching that foam, styrofoam, having it fall apart. As we said, there's no water leaking in. Now here I'm pressing the tape to the tape, and finally that floppy inside strip is securely in place, and the tape is touching the tape, and everything is not going anywhere. That's going to stay there really well. Now I like to put another piece of tape over the circle on the inside and just touch those inside and outside pieces to themselves, and then that makes it really, really sturdy. And that finishes up really well. And as I said before, once you're done, go back over every single edge, make sure it's touching down and pushing securely, and that tape is going to stay in place for a very long time. Now you see you can go back if you want, and if you're a perfectionist, you can gently cut through that Gorilla Tape, just enough, and it rips pretty well. You actually, if you just cut a little bit, you don't actually have to cut all the way, but if you get it started, it rips pretty well. I'm not having a very good time with it here, but you don't want to cut so much that you cut through the plastic and create a hole. But you can go through and clean up those edges if you like to have a nice square line. Now taking a piece of plastic from that insert that we cut out, we're going to create a little awning. It'll keep out some of the rain from coming in the hole. It'll also create shade maybe in summer, but hopefully in summer you don't have it placed out in the direct sunshine, because that could really heat up. Cats would not want to go in there in the summer, but they'd like it in the winter. Now you can use a utility, what do you call, scraper, anything, just getting off that extra styrofoam that was glued to this piece of plastic, and just making smooth edges. As you can see, I'm doing this really fast and sloppy. The cats do not care. So I took a piece of tape, our Gorilla Tape, put it on the underside, slapped it up in that hole, took a piece on the top, and I'm going to go over the top. As I said, it tears pretty easily. There I'm just tearing down the edge on both sides, and that goes that way. Now the wonderful thing about Gorilla Tape is the best place it sticks is it sticks to itself, which can be somewhat of a problem when you're, tearing and working. If it sticks to itself, I usually just throw that piece away and start over again. But here I'm going to extend the awning a little over on the side, and I'm just going to create the height I want of that flap and secure it in place that way. And of course, I've got, when I do the same thing on the other side, I've got that underside which is exposed adhesive, and I don't want to leave that way, because it'll either stick to itself or the cat's hair will stick to it or whatever. But the good thing about the Gorilla Tape, as I said, is it sticks to itself. So I just slap a piece on the other side, press it down firmly, just fold that flap up, And I've got the inside of that side of it covered so that it's not exposed adhesive. And then it'll also secure my level of the flap. Now you notice we're getting a pretty small opening there, but you're going to see in a minute a very large cat go through that hole. So really, unless you have very, very large cats, they're going to have no trouble getting through a 4.5, 5-inch opening. Now here I'm just cleaning it up. You don't have to do this extra bit of taping, but it just makes it look a little tidier. So here you can see how the vertical grooves on the interior shell of the cooler can be used to create an additional windbreak and hold the straw away from any rain that might blow into the shelter. To make this added barrier, just find any piece of scrap plastic that's about the right size and cut an entrance hole for the cats, and here's how we do that. Measure the opening between the two grooves on the inside, and then this is our scrap piece of plastic, and I'm just recreating the size of that opening on the inner groove. And remember that the lid, when the lid goes down, it comes down a little bit, so you can't have your height of your piece go all the way to the top of the cooler. It's got to be down a little bit to the roof when the lid's down, whatever the roof of the inside of the cooler is going to be. So here I'm just using a ruler. After I marked my dimensions, I'm scoring the plastic with the ruler repeatedly. And if you do this a few times using our linoleum knife, you don't have to go all the way through. Just get about halfway repeatedly, just cutting through on that same line carefully, being very careful with your hands out of the way of that line. And you'll see that once I've done it, by turning it over and bending it back, it will pretty much snap in a perfect line with the groove that I created. And if it's not wanting to snap, just go back and repeat the groove a few times with the linoleum knife. But here you can go back from the other side and cut off that small amount. Now, I'm making a hole about the same size as the exterior hole, 4 to 5 inches, 6 if you have gigantic cats. But again, the bigger you make the hole, the more cold air is going to be blowing in there on the cats. I made an X there. That's the piece I'm going to cut out, and that will be the entrance for the inside. Now, if you don't want to use that slow scoring method with the utility knife and the ruler, if you have a jigsaw, they make a blade for plastic. It's not the serrated blade that you have for wood, but it's a flat blade, edged blade. It's specifically for plastic. So here you see again how it slides in, and it's right near, the hole is closest to me, the exterior hole, so I make the interior hole even farther away, so the wind has farther to travel, not going to go around the corner so much. Now I don't necessarily have to secure it in place, but if I wanted to go all the way along, I could keep all the water out. Any water that would blow in, I could keep it from rolling in and getting into the straw bedding that we're going to put in there and keep it completely dry. We just had a little bit of straw, but that's the idea. You want about 3 or 4 inches of straw, and you can see in these small holes a very large cat can get through there if they can get their head through, and the smaller the hole, the more warmth you're going to have.